An introduction to 1 Thessalonians. The Apostle Paul wrote this inspired letter in Corinth, likely late in the year 50 CE, during his second missionary tour. Sometime after arriving in Thessalonica, Paul preached in the synagogue for 3 Sabbaths. Soon a congregation was established there. Opposers from among the Jews became jealous of Paul's success and incited a violent mob. The congregation continued preaching, even after sending Paul and Silas to Berea. 1 Thessalonians has 5 chapters. In chapter 1, Paul warmly commends the congregation for the way they accepted God's word and endured under tribulation. He informs them that their example of perseverance has become known to the congregations in Macedonia and Achaia. In chapter 2, Paul reminds the Thessalonians of his tender affection for them and how he worked hard to avoid being an expensive burden on them. Did you know? The Apostle Paul was a tent maker by trade. He may have done this work to cover his expenses in Thessalonica. In chapter 3, Paul writes that he had sent Timothy to Thessalonica to build up their faith. Now Timothy has returned to Paul with good news of their spiritual prosperity. In chapter 4, Paul comforts those who have lost loved ones in death. Jesus' resurrection is a guarantee that those sleeping in the grave will rise. In chapter 5, Paul describes future events that will lead to the destruction of God's enemies during Jehovah's day. He calls those who live by God's standards sons of light, in contrast with those who reject God's standards. He advises the congregation to stay spiritually awake, to make sure of all things, to pray constantly, and to encourage one another. As you read the first inspired letter to the Thessalonians, note how our perseverance in the face of opposition can encourage others, how the resurrection hope comforts and strengthens those who have lost loved ones in death, and how Jesus Christ, the King of God's kingdom, will destroy all of God's enemies.